security, supportability, reliability.
If you can't support it, then pay a little more money to get a supportable solution.
Hey, it's Brett Chittum with CNWR, and this is Business Technicalities. And guess who I'm here with?
Jason Slagle at home today. Apparently, I have COVID.
Jason has COVID, and I don't want to be anywhere near him. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting
Yeah.
at the office, and he's at home now, so we're not going to be sitting next to each other, of course, probably for about 7 days or
Yeah, probably
however
not.
long
Well,
the
I mean,
incubation.
after today, I was off tomorrow to go to Chicago. It was supposed to be in Chicago on Thursday for the ConnectWise Users Group meeting. Obviously, that's not going to happen.
No.
And I was supposed to go to Louisville on Friday for Bourbon and Beyond.
Mm.
That probably will still happen because it's outdoors and the CDC guidelines these days are 5 days from symptoms. And I first had symptoms on Sunday evening.
Okay.
I started getting tired and not feeling great. So 5 days from Sunday is Friday. So I think I'll be okay then.
And based on your test, you barely have COVID.
Yeah, it's pretty faint, but I mean it's definitely there. So
Yeah.
I only took a test. This doesn't feel like the other 2 times I've had COVID. I only took the test because I wanted the negative so I could confidently say I didn't have COVID, and then I was quite surprised when the line came up.
It's like, dang it. Well, guess what we're talking about today? Oh, this is gonna be a good one. You and I had a good long conversation last night, but
Yeah,
just because we can doesn't mean we should. And
yeah.
I'm gonna take it from the sales aspect, and you're gonna
Yeah,
take it from the technical and probably the most accurate aspect.
yeah. And so some of this is born out of I was on Tom's vlog last week with them, and it was right after I was in Detroit. Southgate, right, or Wyandotte. Actually, I was in, and it got him and I talking on this topic, and then I've been thinking about it. Basically, it's occupied a non-zero amount of my brain power since then, because I think it's a definite middle fine line. I'm going to set a little bit of backstage here, if that's okay with you.
That's for you. You take it away, man. It's all you.
Okay, so a week and a half ago, I guess last Tuesday, I came across a Facebook group in one of the MSP Facebook posts that was basically an MSP that was reinstalling Windows 7 from
Mm,
CD on a system and it wouldn't activate. And he was asking what to do about it, right? So, I mean, the correct actual answer as to what to do about it is you got to call it in and activate it, right? Like Microsoft doesn't want you using Windows 7. It's unsupported. There's no security, right? So they've taken on the activation servers. They will still activate it if you call them. But my immediate response to that was I replied and said, why are you doing this? Right. I think that's a very valid question. There's very few reasons to legitimately be installing Windows 7 on a PC, in 2023, right? Like you should be doing 11 at this point, and
right.
worst case, you should be doing 10. 7 is not getting any more security updates. I kind of got attacked by at least 2 people on that post saying, well, what business is it of yours? Right. And it's actually a
You
lot
got
of business of
attacked.
mine. It's business of yours. It's business of everyone's because when we enable customers to make bad security decisions and those customers get breached, it one moves us a little bit closer to potential regulation, right? Because
Yep.
they're gonna now report, blah blah blah, whatever the case is, and it also makes the names of MSPs everywhere a little bit worse in everyone's mind,
Right.
right? What's that guy going to do? He's going to go out and complain that this person that helped him install Windows 7, assuming he finds out, like this person, yeah, he installed an unsecure, unsupported operating system on my desktop, and so my argument is that you have a fiduciary duty, unless you specifically call out that you don't. Our agreement does, for what it's worth,
Yes.
uh, to provide advice to these people, right? You are the expert. They are hiring you because they don't know any better, and by
Right.
not and by allowing them to do things like that, you cause problems. So
Well, I mean,
yeah,
you think about that. I mean, you could be, yeah, definitely held liable for doing that. But are there ever any use cases where you should do something like that?
I mean, I don't know that you'd be held liable, right? Like, there's a lot of context. The guy never answered to the why you're doing this, right? And
Right.
full disclosure, we have Windows 7 systems running still, right? Like, we have HMI and industrial control stuff that, like, it won't run on modern Windows, right? And
Hmm.
client can't afford the $300,000 cost to
Upgrade.
replace the HMI or whatever the case is, right? And it used to be that these things would run forever, or they didn't have internet access, so it didn't matter, right? You
Hmm.
wall them off and you protect them as best as you can, right? But those are business realities. But that being said, it's unlikely I would ever be reinstalling one from CD, because pretty much all of these devices, with the exception of maybe the odd veterinarian X-ray, which we may still have an XP one out there running around somewhere,
Maybe.
with the exception of those, they're specialized equipment, right? And they're running like Windows 7 OEM. They're not, or like embedded. They're not necessarily running the retail version of Windows 7. So you're probably
Right.
not reinstalling them from a CD.
It's not. Yeah.
Uh,
It's not exactly. It's something that either the company that owns the equipment or maintains that equipment has the OEM version to put
yeah.
on there. So,
So I mean,
um,
this is a
go
case
ahead.
here, right? It's where I can install Windows 7. I
Hmm.
mean, I can install Windows 95 and Windows 98 on stuff right now, right? But in I think at this point you have to justify why that's a good idea, right? The default
Right.
answer to me to that is no. I'm not going to client, like I'm here to protect you. I'm your expert.
Hmm.
Uh, there are no security patches for that, right? If this is going to be connected to any internet or any network or the internet, right? Like it's not safe to run that software anymore. So like you have to justify to me why I'm going to allow you to do that.
Right. Nope. I totally get it. I mean, on the sales side, I had an issue when I first started out. Had a number of them, right? Where
Hmm.
I wanted, as a sales guy, I wanted to sell everything. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say yes. We can do that. We can do that. We can do that. And there'd be many times, and the guys working in the office right now, if they listen to this at some point, will laugh because I would be sitting there talking with a client, and I would hear from someone's office, Brett, that doesn't work that way. And for me, I think on the sales aspect side, I want to say yes and say we can do that. I think I
Yeah,
led you down that road this last week, didn't I?
you did. So we have a yin and a yang here, right? So I have another example that I want to talk about, and then we'll get into some of the finer points of like some of the
Hmm.
things that we see right come in, and then maybe we'll run through a couple role playing scenarios. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop this.
Look at that. There we go.
So we got a call late last week. I think it was Wednesday.
Yes.
So the Facebook thing must happen Tuesday, because this was Wednesday, and we had a nice guy owns a business. I'm not going to name the type of business because I don't want to necessarily identify the guy. He had a Unix machine that was misbehaving, and he called around and couldn't find anyone that would deal with it. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. I bet you it's SCO. I think I told you that before I went. I said,
You
I bet
did.
you this
You
is a
totally
SCO
did.
box. And I drive up there. He's got two locations across the street from each other. I go to the first location, which is more retail. They're like, "Oh no, this thing's across the street." So I go across the street. He takes me up into a room, and this is what I'm met with here, right? I'll zoom in here so you guys, assuming I can, figure out how to do it. Okay, so yes, indeed, this is SCO 505. So it's not even the last version of SCO they ran.
Oh my
These,
gosh.
if you look at this DF output here, this thing's got essentially, I don't know, maybe 30 total gigabytes of drive space.
Wow.
And I'm going to stop sharing for a second, then I'm going to pop it back up just so I can change pictures without accidentally ending up on the wrong one. And this system has run forever without really any work, right? It's you can pop that back up there. As a matter of fact, the dust on it hasn't been disturbed in many, many years. And so the warning light on this thing is blinking,
You
right?
can't see
This
it
is a,
though.
yeah, this is a, well, I could see it. And I told the guy, I'm like, this thing, how you backing this thing up? Because it's got a warning error on it. Eventually it's going to die. He's not, as it turns out. This
Right.
is a Power Edge 2300. The Power Edge 2300 was released in 1998, and they stopped selling it somewhere in the around the year 2000. So this system has been running for what, 25 years now
Oh my
without
gosh.
stopping. Essentially, these drives, who knows? Maybe they've been replaced, maybe they haven't been. but this system is up and running, and it maintains the entire general ledger and point of sale system for this company in custom software written in COBOL by the original accountant that wrote the business. So I talked to the guy and I'm like, man, you can't do this. Like this thing's insecure. It's going to die. He's like, look, man, he's like, I don't know how much longer this business has in it. Margins are shrinking. He's like, I got quotes to replace this and I got $300,000 quotes. And he's like, I
Oh
will
my God.
never pay off a $300,000 quote to replace this hardware. He's like, I understand the risk, right? If I lose it, I lose it. Like I can do things on paper. I witnessed him do it, so he can. It just makes him slower. And he's willing to accept some of that risk. And I educated the guy. I had a conversation about why this is a bad idea, and then I fixed it. And it turns out it had nothing to do with the operating system. He had some data corruption issues in
Hmm.
whatever database it ran, and I ended up just basically clearing out the file that had problems in it because he didn't care about the historical data, and he was able to move forward. But this is a case where there's literally no upgrade path for this, right? Like
Right.
it's a complete rip and replace on a business that is probably in its final leg of, profitability and final leg of openness. And, it doesn't necessarily make financial sense to do that work. We are, for what it's worth, going to have a conversation. I think you have a call with them today.
I do.
We're going to ask them to spend some small amount of money for us to at least try to get this on more modern hardware, and replace the SCSI drives. I'll probably use some blue SCSIs or something.
Hmm.
We'll tap into my retro computing background to find a solution that's a little more robust, and we'll come up with some sort of backup solution for him. So we'll see. We'll get something working so that we can make this a little more supportable. But I got to do a little bit of tinkering, right? So to me, the same thing as I said with the HMIs and stuff, right? There is a use case for this stuff to
Right.
exist, right? Like in this case, I don't know. I would lean on the argument of we should, right? Like this guy is
Okay.
basically his business is gonna close. We have customers like this too. We have a local company that we've been slowly over the years moving off of an old DOS based database system that they use
Right.
that we're actually running in FreeDOS or VDOS or some sort of like modern able to run DOS via emulation on Windows
Hmm.
10 solution to run this old DOS program because they just can't afford. Their margins are so small, right? Like the business has been in the family for 100 years, and they just don't have the margin to upgrade it. So we're helping them, limp it along while we're saving up the money essentially to replace it.
Yeah, it's I think that goes to your character and our character as a company when we think about that. You know, what can we do to help? I mean, we could offer a $300,000 solution for this guy, right? And go right to him and say, "This is
Yeah,
what it's going to be." You didn't have to go out there and
yeah,
fix the program and make things work again, but you did because here we had a client that I'm on the phone with that just doesn't know what to do. He's his hands are tied. He's flustered. He needs help.
yeah. This guy
So
doesn't have $300,000 needs, right? So
no,
like whoever he talked to that quoted him $300,000 is clearly trying to take advantage of him.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things that, you just sometimes there are both sides of this. And I think that this brings up a larger question, right? We kind of noodled through this on the vlog last Thursday, but we get bookings all the time, right? Either
Mhm.
bookings or requests for consultation from customers that view the, and I'm going to disclaim this with I am a huge open source guy. I've been using Linux since before Windows 95 came out, right? Like my
Right.
entire life and career is built on open source software, but I run Meraki access points at home because I need them to
Mhm.
just work, right? And we get bookings and questions from people that are basically looking at the cheap or free aspect of the software, assuming they can pay us a little bit of money to help them configure it, and then that these things will run forever. And this is where my brain is broken right now, and why I wanted to have this sales versus tech conversation, because in many cases my initial thought to that is, well, clearly you don't know how to operate or run or configure these systems, right? Because you're going to hire us to do it. And it sounds from this email that you sent us like this is a mission critical production system that's going to have real impact when it's down. So what is your thought for ensuring that the system continues to be secure, supportable, and reliable?
Because obviously they're coming to us for help because they can't configure it,
Yeah,
right? So once we do configure it, I mean, let's face it, firmwares change, right? Versions change on software. Who's going to keep up with that? And I get your point on that, but I want to go back to the sales aspects of it.
yeah,
So we charge them, 1, 2, 3 hours of consulting work
yep,
and took care of this, built the system with them. Um, we've had return people coming through to
for
say,
sure.
hey, okay, it's been a couple years. You did this for me 2 years ago. Now I need some help here. Um, I know, with some of these that we're talking about, it's not going to be something that's going to become a managed client, or it
Yep.
could become a managed client. And that's what I'm thinking about with a lot of the consulting work we do. Which one of those could become a truly managed service client?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question comes down to, what is our so we've put in this mission critical system in there, right? That like once we leave is never going to get we can turn on auto update. Some of the
Hmm.
things support it, some of them don't. We could turn on auto update and then hope and pray that you never get an incompatible update or it never breaks again. But what's the plan for these customers when it goes down during the middle of business operations, right? Like I'm not like one of the bigger reasons that we as a company have moved to the managed services offering is the workload tends to be a little more predictable, right? Like I
Right.
tend to keep these things patched and maintained and up to date, which allows me the freedom to schedule my guys out in a more predictable fashion.
Hmm.
So instead of having this, right, like we keep it, running at like the 80% utilization mark. And
Right.
I don't necessarily always have the bandwidth to be the fire department, right? Like, oh,
Hmm.
this random customer SCO box died, and now everyone needs to drop everything. Like, it so happens, I find that sort of stuff very fulfilling. So I was willing to basically take, and I noodling going around up to Southgate anyways, right? So like, this place was 5 minutes from the office up there, so it just so happened that you caught me on a day that I really needed some tech work to refill my like
You needed some
happiness
geek
bucket,
time. I said
right?
geek
And
time.
yeah, and because I require that, right? I get
Yeah.
increasingly cranky when I don't get to do that stuff, and so I'm actually have some side projects. I think Tom and I will talk about here once we're done recording because we're going to do a recap of VCF. Uh, it he just so happened to catch me in the right day on the right time to be able to fix
Hmm.
that. But like,
Oh,
it's not
absolutely.
always going to be the case that we can drop everything to support, you know, random Synology that's had 2 drives die now because no one's paying attention
Mhm.
to it, and now the customer's lost data and they can't work.
Yeah, I think you drive a fine line there, right? And because we have a lot of DIYs, right, or DIYs, and they
Hmm.
want to do it themselves. They want to feel like they've accomplished something, which is good, but then they get stuck. Um, we for the years that we were doing consulting through Lawrence and LTS, it was not we didn't have many times where it was a fire sale after the fact. There were a handful of them, I would say, that would come back and say, man, this I need help now. And at some
I've
points
already
we'd
seen
have to,
it.
yeah, I know, and we'd have to pull Eric off what he was
Yeah,
doing and get onto that to do some help. um and I'm talking about the consulting ones, the existing
yeah.
clientele. That's another story altogether. Um, but I do believe that we have to, because you end up becoming a consulting break fix company at that
You
point.
back yourself into a break fix corner.
Yeah,
100% you do. Because these
and I
customers are
get
only going to
that.
call you when it's broken, and when it's broken, it's critical, and they need you to drop everything and do it.
Right. And in some cases we've had people do that, and then we pivoted to that managed service agreement type situation. Doesn't always happen, let's face it. Not everybody wants to pay a monthly fee for something they consider a cost center, not a
Yeah,
profit center. Um, so it is a fine line. I don't know how to
I don't either.
unwind that
Yeah. I don't know
because
that
it
you need
makes
to unwind
money.
it, right? Like, I'm actually a big fan of the you can book me stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm going to tell the client to just go book me. And you know what? That booking may be a week and a half out. And if the client is willing to accept the fact that this just may not work for a week and a half, then this is probably a really good solution for them,
Hmm.
right?
Nope, I agree.
If they can't, then maybe we need to talk about something a little with a little more supportability.
Yeah, no, yeah, and not something open source or not something that, and because like you said, at some point is let's I'm just going to name the products. Let's say at sometimes UniFi makes sense, but at other
Uh,
times it doesn't.
that one's a little. That one's a little. If you're, I mean, for the most part, we've had few problems with that, right? Like,
Right,
so I have a harder time. The move away from UniFi Wi-Fi to at our org to Meraki was a tough one for me because of how much more expensive the Meraki stuff is,
right.
and the fact that it doesn't justify the increased cost in many cases, right? Like, but you guys are going through a situation right now with the client you're onboarding where access 200 or 20 or however many access points up in the ceiling of a warehouse that require a lift, we can't identify the controller.
Yeah. Yes. And it was what was funny is a year and a half ago when we did some installing, they had access to that controller and were able
Yep.
to adopt those things. So in a year's time, what happened? Because I was
Yeah.
dealing with the same person.
And I've run into that multiple times where you've got cloud key that dies, right? Like it
Yep.
just dies. You would
And did they
never know that the
config?
cloud
They
key
probably
died
didn't.
if you were not using the splash screen, right?
Right.
Because the APs, they have their config. The switches, they have their config. They'll run forever, right?
Hmm.
Like until you need to go make a change to them, or you need to manage them, or you need to upgrade them, you need to do something. You would never even know that it's broken.
Right.
It's the same sort of thing. We've got a client right now that our internal we run a controller with a bunch of people on it, and we haven't been able to upgrade it yet because we've got a client that's on downrev firmware on their switches that we picked up from another. They're a newer client, and until we get
Right.
those switches upgraded or replaced, we haven't been able to upgrade our controller. And you run into things like that. We run into them all the time where clients, we onboard a client that's using UniFi, no one can find the controller. You end up running around in factory, recreating the config, run around factory, reset the things, readopt them to the new controller,
Yeah.
right? And there's a little bit of downtime associated with that. On the access points, that's not super onerous to do. On the switches, it can be a nightmare
Correct.
because you
Correct.
don't have access to the configs, you don't know what VLANs were assigned to what port, you don't know what ports were trunking, right? Like it's a
Right.
nightmare.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that. It's just how do you combat
Yeah,
that? I'm just trying
I
to
don't know.
think. I mean, because there are so companies, and this is the thing we struggle as an IT company. I think IT companies all around that are doing MSP work and wanting to do MSP work. You're wanting to go to we're going to businesses that already view us as a
Yeah.
cost center and a cost they don't think they need.
Yep.
So when they get the opportunity and see that, well, if I buy all UniFi equipment, it's a third of the cost of buying all
Yep.
Cisco or Meraki, right? But should we? Should we
I don't
embrace
know.
that?
Yeah. Like the argument is that anyone that the population of people, I mean, and I guess this holds true in both cases, the population of people that can configure that Meraki versus that UniFi, they're probably pretty similar. The Meraki's pretty dumb easy. The question is, what's the population of people that can recover the system if you lose the controller? Because I would
Right,
argue that that's a lot lower, right? Like, and that's not going to happen on the Cisco side unless you fail to pay the license fee, right? In which case,
right,
it's just going to stop working after 5 years or whatever the case is, anyway. Uh, but even that, you're not going to lose your config. It's just going to stop working. You're going to call them up. They're going to charge you the license fee, and it's going to start working again.
right.
Uh, the Yeah, I don't know.
I
I don't know the answer to this.
I think it
What's the
would be
crowd think?
smart if UniFi could develop something in their UI to to actually automatically back up that config somewhere because you can back up
They
and
might.
download
I
that
don't know. They might
config.
do that.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't because I would have set it up because I run UniFi at home and
Yeah.
I run my controller through a Docker on my Synology and it's it's it doesn't I every time I do an update I have to download the config, do the update and it's never broken. I'll be honest with you. Every update I've done it's never broken, but there's that chance it could. And then if I didn't download the config, now I don't have one. I have to rebuild it, and
Yeah.
it is a pain. So, I mean, having some type of an auto config
Apparently,
download would be
there
kind
is
of
an
cool.
API with very old
Okay.
docs so there may be some way to do that. Maybe that's what we do, right? Like maybe that helps with that. But that comes down to the other a whole nother discussion about data retention, that I'm not
Hmm.
necessarily going to keep the data, including passwords and stuff, for a client. I don't have a legal reason to do that, because
Right.
I open myself up for a ton of risk doing that.
Yeah, because
I
if
don't
once you don't have it,
know.
then you're liable. You
Yeah.
say you
No.
have it, you say you're doing it, and then
No,
it's
I
not
don't.
there.
I'm never going to tell them I have it. I'm more worried about the opposite of, I haven't said I have it, and I have it, and the repository where I store these things gets popped,
Yeah,
and now
you're
the
right.
passwords for a bunch of systems are in this config backup repository, and potentially it becomes a buffalo jump to a bunch of systems that don't even have a business relationship with me,
Hmm.
right? So, like, from my perspective, and this is a whole different this is actually maybe a topic for next week, data retention and
Yeah.
what that means, and why we may not want to do it. Yeah, yeah. Why we
Well,
don't hold data for clients that aren't
yeah.
clients.
Well, and you talk, we were talking about how to determine whether it makes sense to do something or not do something. And I like the three things you talked about. You said security, supportability, reliability.
Yeah. Yep. And it's a
So,
trade-off, right? Like, if you can't support it, and then pay a little more money to get a supportable solution. That's my argument every
right.
time.
Yeah, well, that makes sense because in the long run, is what's it going to cost? What's
Yeah.
the cost differential, or the you always say non-zero amount. What's the what's it going to be, in
Yeah.
the long run? And I think for like something we talked about with that guy with the skull, it's in the long run, he's not going to be there long term, right? So
Yeah.
what can we do to develop something that at least gets him by
Yep.
for another year or two before he just shuts down and retires?
Yep. Okay.
So.
I think that's a good spot to end.
All right, and it's for I think for everybody out there, you're gonna have to make your own decisions on what you do and how you do it, but understand the impact it's going to have on your team down the road. That's a big one.
Yeah.
I think that when you say we have a firefighter mentality here. That's one of our core things, but do we want to use it all the time, right?
Yeah.
Do we,
Yeah.
or do we want to be proactive and can't if a system's not something we can be proactive with, do we want to do it?
Yeah. I don't know.
So
Time will tell.
that's
I'm
right.
very curious. This is one that I fully expect some interactivity with in the comments. So leave them there. Hit the various buttons you're supposed to hit. That I'm a bad YouTuber if I don't say.
Like and
Those
subscribe,
are the
right?
ones. And apparently there's a bell. I don't know. Maybe it's gone now. Who knows? It
Oh,
seems
no,
to
don't
change
worry.
every day.
Amber will put it up there and get
Yeah.
it. She'll do this. She does a great job, by the way, and she really does. Anyways, I think we're
Okay.
done. We've gone
Yeah.
28 minutes and some seconds, and I think it's time to go to work. And you,
Yep.
COVID-redded person, need to go rest or
Yeah. I
something.
have to go record with Tom now, and then I have some other things today. So cool.
Hey, have a good one, Jason.
Yep. You too. See ya.
Bye.